And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Melissa Agnes. She is the author of Crisis Ready, Building an Invincible Brand in an Uncertain World. She's a leading authority on crisis preparedness, reputation management, and brand protection. She's been a TEDx speaker. She's worked with NATO, ministries of foreign affairs and defense, financial services firms, tech firms, healthcare organizations, etc. And here she is sitting with us today. So welcome aboard, Melissa.
Thanks, Peter. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So let's just sort of dive in. So when I look at your resume, you've got all the boxes checked, right? You've got the expertise, authorship, speaking, TEDx talk, etc. Maybe tell us for a minute how all those things come together for you in service of your business.
That's a good question. Well, I started with the whole content marketing thing. That was the way that I started in this industry before it was a thing. Like crisis management was a thing, but not my viewpoint and my lens on crisis management. And people weren't talking about or addressing, the challenges and the opportunities that come with the way that the world shifted over the last decade, which is tech, right?
Right.
So the only way I felt that with no real marketing budget as a young entrepreneur, the only way that I really felt that I could kind of make waves or help people start to ask themselves the questions that I felt that they really needed to be asking themselves in order to answer them, which were, mission critical for their organizations, was through my blog, and then through speaking, and then through, podcasting and videos. And so that's really how I just, with the mission of creating awareness and providing solutions to the questions I was asking people to ask of themselves and ask of their businesses, that was my strategy. And that's kind of how it all intersected and came together.
I love it. So I want to drill down on one piece that you mentioned there that I think people sometimes fast forward over is, if I were to summarize what you just said, so you had a different take on crisis management, right? So crisis management is not a new field, but you had a different perspective, a different take, something to add to the conversation, a different perspective, right? And then you look back and said, oh, geez, but I don't have the budgets of big firm X or the embedded competitors or whatever, the bad ones. However, I think people often underestimate the power of good content and thought leadership to overcome, budget deficits, right? If you can't outspend them, you can outthink them.
And consistency.
Okay, so let's talk about both of those, right? Because you don't need money to be consistent and you don't need money to be smart, right? So if you have those two things going for you, how did you sort of, and I don't mean it's a, binary thing, win versus lose, but how did you make your mark being consistent and using your thought leadership?
I really didn't stop. I think it also comes in hand that I have a natural ability to take at communication. So I can articulate something very, very complex in a way that doesn't seem complex, or a subject matter that's really boring, typically speaking, and yet impassions me, and I can get other people really, really excited about it. And so that's a talent that I have, in addition to my expertise in my field.
So how did you know that you had it though, right? So we all have all kinds of talents. Some of us aren't really sure which ones matter or which ones can extract value from a marketplace.
To be honest, I didn't know that I had it until I knew that I had it.
Okay.
Several years later, looking in hindsight, and people telling me like, wow,
Sure.
you're really good at doing that. And me going, oh,
Oh, it's a
that's why
thing.
people listen, and that's why they get it. And that's why, but I did have it. And I think that, it's a combination of all of these things, as well as a really big passion and want to. It's so much bigger than me. What the work that I do and the importance of, becoming crisis ready for society, for the world at large, is so much bigger than me. So I'm also somebody who and this too, I only know through, retrospect, is when something really, really needs to get done, not that I'll get up and do it, but if something is direly important, I will, typically speaking, looking at my past record, our track record, I will look around and say, okay, who is doing this and who should be taking responsibility or accountability for this? And this stemming from when I was a kid. And then when I see that nobody is owning up to the plate, then it's and I care about it that much and I believe in it that much and I know that it's something that's beyond me, then it's okay. I'm going to do it. Nobody else can do it. I'm going to do it. And then I give it my all.
Got it.
So that's what I've done in this industry, and increasingly so. I mean, I'm about to launch something in 2020 that I aim to revolutionize this industry with. And that's because it's not being done. So I'm going to do it.
Cool. So you see the opportunity. So let me ask you this then. The other side of that relentlessness, of that persistence, is not knowing or not being certain when to sort of give up on something. And what I mean by that is there's lots of things that you could do to fill the hours of your day, right? You're a guest lecturer, you're blogging, you could be on podcasts like this, you could be writing. Like there's no shortage of things once you sort of get into the thought leadership,
Space.
blender, if you will.
Yeah.
At what are the metrics or things that you use to determine, like, okay, that might have been fun, but not yielding me what I want, or that's not worth doing anymore, even though I've gotten some good feedback there. How do you sort of choose and pick and balance, because you can't do all things?
I can't do all things. Absolutely. I know exactly. I always keep my eye on what my end goal is, what my core, mission is. And then from there, taking a step back, I know the precise, 3 or 4 different ways in which I can do that, in which I can achieve that mission. And they're completely different. So for example, you mentioned guest lecturing. My book, my book was written for professionals, but it was also written for academia, because if I want to change the culture, the societal culture of organizational structure, which is to be crisis ready moving forward, I know that students are the professionals of the future, and if we're still teaching them archaic methods in school, that's a problem, and that's going to not align with my core mission.
Sure.
So I know, so students or academia is a bucket there that I constantly focus on. So I have my buckets of, if I want to achieve this mission, who is it that I need to reach and why and
Right,
how, and then stemming down. Go ahead.
but even if you have those buckets, so whether it's students or communications experts or whoever they may be, at some point you have to have some metrics in place to say, okay, so over the last year to serve that constituency, I've done A, B, C, and D, and based on these metrics, it's either working horribly, amazingly, or mediocre, right? So therefore, I need to change the mix, do more of this and less of this. That's I was sort of looking to see how you determine the
You really
benefits and
just
the
gave the
outcome.
answer. Yeah, absolutely. You really just gave the answer. It is in looking and tracking everything that you do and looking at the results and the impact of those results that you achieve, and then moving forward. And one of the things that I've realized is the value of a team,
Yeah.
which sounds so crazy and stupid, but seriously, I've been doing this alone for so many years. And as of last year, it was like, oh my God, I'm blocking myself because there's so much, and there's so much that I need to do, and there's so much that I want to do, and only so much I can do. So learning how to find the right team members to come in and delegate those things to and have that support
So I
system.
love that. So we call that, when we're in our work with our clients, is how do we determine the things that you are not only best qualified to do, but also enjoy and can't put on someone else to do? And then how do you develop a strategy that builds a moat around you? So it's typically things like the actual creation of the content, certain delivery, etc. It's typically not things like being the expert on the nuances of a social media platform or the technical production of a podcast, or the list goes on and on: scheduling, logistics, admin, etc. And I think what happens often, particularly early on for a thought leader, is they're doing everything out of necessity, and then they you reach a level of success and say, wait a minute, do I really need to be the one dealing with whatever, posting such and such on Instagram? I think I can take that off my plate
And what a dream that is.
now.
When somebody found out, I guess it was like a year and a half ago, somebody said, hey, who do you have that, edits and uploads your podcast? It's like, you're looking at her. They were like, are you kidding me? And at the time I was like, well, yeah. And then now it's like, well, no.
Right, right.
So yeah.
Awesome. You've got your TEDx talk. So a lot of people dream of or will do all sorts of interesting things to get a TED talk or a TEDx talk, etc. Can you give us sort of your TEDx story, not just how you got it, but good things that might have happened to you post?
The thing that's challenging with all of the different ways in which thought leaders really communicate their messages out there is that you can't really you can't really quantify one specific. It's like everything together is, what brings the outcome. So you kind of asked me a two-part question. The TEDx talk was something that I always wanted to do. I believe in potentially doing things before you're ready, which is otherwise I'd never think I was ready. And it fortunately, I kind of just landed in my lap. I was asked to do it by a client. My client was the the city of Los Angeles, and they were putting it on. And they said, we really want you to be a part of it." So that was wonderful. What's come now? I put everything into it. I mean, I have like a 2 or 3 thousand word blog post that describes everything that I back in 2014, 2015 did in order to prepare, taking that seriously and prepare for it. And then as a result, I, so much has come as a result of that. And even I think it just comes with the weight of doing a TEDx talk. People see that as something big, monumental maybe, and it bears a lot of weight and credibility behind it. So as a result of that, opportunities have come. But then no one opportunity, I don't think, has come just as a direct result of only the TEDx talk. It's really a culmination of everything that I've done
Got it.
that just
Got
plays in
it.
together.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. What are some of how do you break your time in terms of, wait a minute, here's the long list, the infinite list of things I'd like to be doing relative to thought leadership and content, and here's the things I will do this quarter, this month, this whatever time period?
That's one of my biggest struggles. So I have these big, beautiful windows in my apartment in Manhattan that are my whiteboard. And always on them, like I'm looking at it right now. So in front of my desk, I have big and important, and then, the bulk of over this month, what I need to achieve. And then I have my another column that's in between times. And then it's like everything in between that needs to kind of fit in. And I try not to fight my inspiration or my motivation. So if I'm on a day where I know I'm going to be working until 4 a.m.
Right.
because I'm not going to want to stop, then I maximize on that. And I really go inward and say, is today a writing day, or is today a reading day, or is today a client day, or is today.
So sort of chunking the time against an activity, because
Exactly. And
it's hard to shift from working on a client deliverable to an abstract of a new concept that you want to sort of think through.
well, I mean, there's a lot of hours in a
Right,
day,
right.
right? So it's never really a full day of something. It's always, otherwise if I do that, then I need to change locations. Like I'll go work from 4 different places in a
Yep.
day. But yeah, so it's blocks of hours. Like over the next 2 hours, I am going to put away all distractions and just focus on this. But the second part of that is because I am inspired to do that. So I'll look at my list and say, okay, all of this has to get done this month. What am I inspired to do right now? Because I've spent so long trying to counter that, where it's like I'm inspired to write, but I really need to do this other thing. And so I'll do that other thing, but then I'm fighting against myself.
Right.
I'm not super productive. And then when it comes time to write, I'm no longer inspired to write. And those of us who write, we know that that's
That's
challenging
very challenging.
when you're not
Absolutely.
inspired to write, and otherwise it just flows out of you.
Yep.
So I kind of just tap inward and say, okay, what is today? Unless, like for example, specifically today, this is my first call this morning, but then I've got 12 hours. My end of the day as a guest lecturer at 9 p.m. So it's a day of
Just slamming it.
for everybody
Right,
else.
right,
Yeah.
right, right. Got it. So I want to sort of pivot for a moment. You've got all this activity, all the sort of hooks in the right waters, and you're measuring it. So that's all good, right? You're getting the outcomes. Move to the other side of sort of mapping your client avatars, the content that you talk about, to the service products and offerings. Because I think where I was going here is oftentimes people start their journey and there's one thing that they do. Hey, book me to do X, right? I'm the consultant, the advisor, the coach, etc. And then it sort of evolves because you as the individual can't scale, but your content can. So can you talk about sort of that mix?
Oh, your content can. Yes, it can. Yes. So I kind of just look at what are the ways, a couple things, what are the ways in which I can reach the most amount of people? And that can be through content, thought leadership and content marketing, or it can be actual work, actually helping them when that's the end result that you want anyways, helping them become crisis ready. And then what are the different ways in which I can do that, especially just being me at this point in time? How can I maximize and reach the most amount of people, help the most amount of people with, not going crazy and not ever, ever, ever having time to sleep? So speaking is a great way. It's a great lead in. It gets them inspired. It gets them thinking differently. It gets, helps them see things from a new perspective in a way that they can actually achieve it. So that's great. Then there's, you can hire me as an advisor, consultant. That's one thing. But then, for example, I just kicked off last quarter a new coaching program, which is a handful of organizations in so many different industries that are coming together over the course of over the course of 6 months. And we're doing a coaching program. So I'm not actually delivering the deliverables. I am teaching them through coaching calls and as a group twice a month, and then giving them worksheets and guiding them through the process of actually doing it. And so it's a remarkably lower investment for them in terms of dollar amount. And for me, it as a whole, it equals, the same
Sure.
that I would normally get as a consulting, but I can take on a few of these coaching groups at a time.
Reach more people. Yeah.
Exactly. And help guide them through. And then all of that feeds into, okay, well, how can, as that as a concept, as a model, how can I then tweak that, modify that to actually scale it where it's no longer any of my time and can reach every single organization would benefit from this. And that is the next piece of the puzzle that I'm working on.
Yeah, and that's I was going to ask on that because typically what happens is there's the it's sort of a transition from let's call it consulting, but it could be coaching, it could be advisory, whatever. But services that you as the expert have to be providing, right? So you need to theoretically be in the room with your content for dollars to change hands, and then it could start to move into training, educational, etc., where maybe in your case it's not bringing you in for an actual crisis, but preparing or teaching others how to be crisis ready sort of prophylactically, right? So it's not, oh my God, we get the pressure of something bad happened, we got to do it. But how do we teach people to do that? You don't need to be in the room. You can develop the tools, the video, it's whatever the right mix is. And totally different business model, totally different price points, but they share the same DNA. Is that where you're going?
Yes.
Got it. And okay, without giving away the punchline or whatever here, or the secret reveal, because it sounds like you got something cooking for 2020. What are the things that you've been thinking about before making the decisions to go the directions that you're having? What are things that you considered? What's gone into the decision making process? What have you learned?
Yeah, so much. So again, it started with a grievance, a frustration within my industry, within my profession, and that is that there's no regulation, there's no certification, there's no criteria by which anybody for to dictate what best practice is. And as a result of that, practitioners are doing, providing clients or organizations with solutions, let's say, that are archaic.
Sure.
And the risk of that is dire because we're not just saying, oh, we missed this campaign this week, or, we had shitty advice on a campaign. It's we got bad advice on the most critical moment of our existence. And as a result, the economy's crashed, or the business is going under and people's livelihoods are going under, or, in the case of law enforcement in different situations, lives are at stake. So it really, really, really bothered me. I feel that organizations and society deserve better. So that was the big thing. And that came when I published my book. I had so many organizations that came to me that showed me that we're bleeding money, we're bleeding
Yep.
reputation. These are the consequences of trusting the wrong quote unquote expert, and then the myriad of challenges
Sure.
that comes with that, just on a large scale impact, as well as them saying we want to do better, but now we don't trust.
So I think the opportunity, because I've seen this in multiple disciplines, is if you are a true expert in your domain, which you are, right, and there aren't standards that are being applied to, and you see those, you can have the courage to put your flag in the ground and say, you know what, I'm going to create the standard, damn it, right, and I'm going to say this is the minimum threshold by which people need to hold themselves accountable before they put it out to clients, et cetera. You can become sort of that good housekeeping seal of approval not just from a business opportunity standpoint, but from an sort of content integrity standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, my book is adopted in over 100 course curriculums, higher education around the world, including Harvard and Homeland Security. So I have a good foundation there. And then the second point I want to say is that yes, somebody needs to do it. So going back to my point earlier, where you look around, nobody's saying, you pick it up and say, okay, fine, I'll do it. It needs to get done, so let's do
Yep.
this. It's also so much bigger than me. So it's so
Sure.
much bigger than just one person to say these are best practices. So there's other elements to that. So your first question was like, no, it wasn't like, your first question was around, how did I come to that? And then what are the different things and what have I learned?
Yep.
There's so many. So I said, okay, if that's the mission, if that's the goal to achieve that, and in the greater purpose of creating this crisis ready world, I don't want to own an agency. So
Right.
that's out of,
Yep.
so then what's the business model? And then the second part of that is I can't do this by myself. So what does that mean? Who can I trust? And how can I create a community of like-minded experts that all share in this same vision for the greater purpose that is beyond any one sole human? How can I create a network or create a community where we all come together and we do this together? So that's another one of the pieces.
And those experts that you're inviting into the community share values or have the same standards or perspective or
Yes.
mindset that you do, because I think in so many content domains, it's like any other business, any other industry, there's a continuum of like really really bad to off the charts amazing to struggling to whatever, and putting yourself on the higher end of that continuum is a good thing to do if you've got the goods to do it. And I like what you're doing there in terms of partnering with others that hold a similar mindset.
Yep. Thank you.
Cool. Well, this has been great. As we start to wrap up here, any final thoughts on someone that is out there right now, say where you might have been 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, earlier in the journey of do this, don't do that, or
I would say, yeah, I think people say, what would you tell your enter the age-year-old self, if you could? And my response was always, well, just keep going because I know where you're going to end up. So don't stop. But I think it really is don't stop. Especially as thought leaders, like sometimes it sounds like, or sometimes it feels like you're speaking into the wind, or sometimes you'll get backlash on things. And I did. I had to build a thick skin right from the start because I was a 20-some-year-old young woman talking about really important things. And first of all, back then it was really just male dominated, and it was older gentlemen who had been around for
right.
decades and who believed in their practices and would come and publicly challenge me, and I had to grow a thick skin and just so keep the core belief on what the mission is, what your mission is, and if it's for the greater good, then don't waver on that and continually evolve and challenge yourself and don't stop. I think that's the biggest thing I would have told myself. Don't stop.
Awesome. Well, great stuff. Well, thanks for sharing everything that you did today. Lots of people can learn from what you've shared with us today, and I appreciate the candor and the transparency, and wish you luck on your new project in 2020. Thanks so much, Melissa.
Thank you so much. This has been a joy.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.